A week ago, we were here in the same spot on the way to the hospital with a lot of concern and trepidation because it was such a major thing. Because you discovered this incidentally, looking for something that had been bothering you for many, many years, and actually had been there for many years. But this team of doctors identified it, and it was right before convention, and you were in the middle of so many things, and
it might have been an incidental finding for that moment, but it wasn't an incidental finding because I did look for it. I had issues for many years, including vertigo, lightheadedness, headaches, things that people attributed to either stress or they couldn't attribute it to anything, so that became part of my daily routine. Vertigo being one of them, which is not a normal experience and not a normal symptom that people should have and should not deal with it. It kind of got to the point where I'd be like, hey, hold on, I'm vertigo. Okay, let's get back on to business. And you can't be like that because, I would have been another one of those 30,000 people that die every year from brain aneurysms. And don't think it can't be you, because I would have thought the same thing. It can't be me. But it did. It happened to me. And I had a brain aneurysm. And I've had it fixed. And I think now it's all about not starting a foundation, because it's certainly not about raising money. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here about educating people. JR's here to educate people. The doctor wants to educate people. I think what we want to do now is take this experience and do something positive with it and educate people so they know what to look for and the symptoms. I didn't even know what an MRI was until I had one done 3.5 weeks ago. On July 20th, I was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, which is something I could have bought in 2007 if somebody told me I had it, because I was looking for it. I had the symptoms of it.
I actually had an MRI and went to the neurologist, and it was there, but they didn't look hard enough.
Well, I don't know if it's that they looked hard enough, or you got to be really good to be able to see an aneurysm on an MRI, because they don't always show up. Our doctor saw it on there, but they know what to look for. But an MRI studies the arteries of the brain and the body, and that's what saw my brain aneurysm. So who goes into the doctors and asks for a brain MRI? Nobody, because nobody even knows what an MRI is. Or an aneurysm of the stomach, or an aneurysm of the heart. There's not just aneurysms of the brain. Mine just happened to be my brain. And people who have brain aneurysms almost never have a chance to make it to the hospital and do what I did. They die before they leave their home. And if they don't die, they're 90% debilitated for the rest of their life. That would have been me if I'd listened to a doctor who told me there was nothing wrong with me. A medical practitioner. They're not perfect, they're practitioners. And the thing is, they told me to go home, that everything was okay. And I told JR I'm not going to go home, and I'm not going to go home until I figure out why I'm having these episodes, because there's something electrically wrong with me. And I could feel it, and it was God's way of giving me a heads up that, hey, keep digging, and I did. And it wasn't until I had the MRI that 15 minutes later I found out, guess what? I was right. There was something medically, electrically wrong with me. I had a brain aneurysm at my brain stem, 8.5 millimeters big.
Do you want to tell them a little bit about this procedure? It was it's 1 week later, and we're so thankful that you had the opportunity to treat this, but it was a little bit of a surprise and hard to assimilate and adjust to so suddenly. It was a real profile and courage on your part to do that, but this brain aneurysm is such that it would be difficult to operate from the outside on it anyway and open you up, because it was around the brain stem. So they went this miraculous procedure in science and doctors. It's just amazing what they were able to do without opening your brain. You want to tell about it?
Well, sure. Everybody who sees me is surprised that I still have my hair and my head on, but that's the miraculous thing about endovascular surgery. And I'm grateful for it, because people are saying, oh, well, you took the less invasive approach. Well, I'm glad it was non-invasive, but more importantly, I wasn't a candidate for somebody to open up my skull, because I had a brain aneurysm at my brainstem, which is the central part of the brain where everything comes together. So I wouldn't have made it through, open head surgery necessarily, not easily. It would have been too dangerous, and nobody wants to operate on somebody who has something with all the different cords of your brain and all the operating things of your entire body wrapped around it. And so that wouldn't have been a safe option. So everybody we'd spoken to was like, hey, going in and opening up and clipping, it's not really an option. So the question was, what was the option? Was there an option? Because, to just tell me I can't operate on your brain, and we got to leave this thing in your head wasn't an option either. And so we were fortunate enough to meet with Dr. Peterson over at Mount Sinai, who does clippings generally by opening the skull and clipping off the aneurysm. And he told me, this wouldn't be, you can't do that type of surgery with where your location is and the size of it, truthfully. But we do have the right guy, my partner, who can do it endovascularly, which is going through the leg and through the main artery of the body, going up to your heart, past your heart, not through it, but past your heart, through the carotid artery and into your brain. That seems pretty intense. And at the moment, of course, terrifying. So, but we did it. And we did it because the life factors of aneurysms are, women, it happens more too. I'm a woman. 40 years old, 40 years old and above, they have a tendency, and the studies shown that that's when they go. And
well, that doesn't apply to you. You're 20-something.
It's nice of you to think that. And over 7.5 millimeters or greater is when they burst, and I was at 8.5. So leaving it in my brain wasn't an option. Plus, I had symptoms, real symptoms. So if maybe I didn't have symptoms, maybe everybody wouldn't have acted on it so fast, but we did, because we knew that I actually had these symptoms for more than 10 years. So for me to ignore them any longer was not smart, and God wasn't going to give me another chance. I always say it's like JR's story when, God sends you the rowboat, the helicopter, and all these different things to help you when your water's flooding with, when your house is flooding with water, and you don't take advantage of them because you think God's going to save you. Well, who do you think sent the lifeboat? Who do you think sent the helicopter? So this was God's way of saying, Loren, do something about it. He can't do it for you. And I took a position against what most people would do and listen to their doctor and go home and say, no, I'm not going to go home because something's wrong. And I'm so grateful that I believed in myself enough to do that, because that's why I'm sitting here having this conversation with you today and sitting beside my husband, finally enjoying our life peacefully, knowing that those symptoms will go away. In fact, going through the surgery was the most frightening thing of my life, to think about that, what's going to happen on this table, or I could die. But then to think about what would happen every day of my life if I didn't fix it, and if I didn't know every day I'd wake up with a headache, that I might not see my family in the next moment, or it might be my last hug or my last goodbye, and it might happen after a fight, or, when we're having a disagreement. I didn't want to live that way. And you shouldn't have to either, so you have to know the signs. And I guess the most important thing is, the afterwards. Like, I remember waking up from the hospital and saying, hey, am I at the hospital or am I in heaven? And they said I was in the hospital, and I remember feeling so relieved, thinking to myself, I get this chance. Like, I wanted to replace the fear that we had for the last 3.5 weeks with faith. Of course, it became a trending topic, replacing fear with faith. And I think it was because that night, I was in the bed, and you're laying there with your husband, and your daughter's emotional, your husband's emotional, and you're trying to be kind of the strong one so nobody falls apart, because I didn't want everybody to fall apart, and I want everybody to know, like, life goes on with or without you. So here's the way we should do things. If something goes wrong, and if something, goes wrong, this is what we're going to do. But the most important thing is, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to replace all of our fear and have faith, because God gave us an opportunity to find this out. And we did that. And
part of that faith was that we did the necessary research to find the best doctors at this. And that's another responsibility that you have. Not all doctors are the same, because they don't have the same amount of experience. And finding the right one that's done it many times.
Turn the camera towards you, because that's important. Let me turn it towards you.
Well, I'm okay. Good.
Well, and I think that's so critical what JR said. Like, it's our responsibility to determine how we feel. We know our body better than anybody else. It's funny, because I had this same conversation last summer, the same exact time, and I wrote about it in the Huffington Post article just a few months ago. It says, what your mammogram won't tell you. And that was about a story where I had I found a lump in my breast and nobody believed me. Even the doctors couldn't feel it. But I knew it existed. The most important thing is knowing what you're getting into and doing all your homework. It's your job to do the research. Nobody's going to do that for you. And if you need help, ask friends. I asked friends. I didn't know who to go to. For me, it was all about having a plan and a team. Because when things in your life fall apart all around you, and mine fell apart around our company's biggest event of the year, 10 days before it, in the middle of, what seemed like a crazy busy time, but life isn't perfect. You know what I mean? So it's not saying, hey, let me drop this on her when the timing's right. There is no right timing. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a brain surgeon or a brain doctor as a friend. But when you ask friends around you for recommendations and talk to people, you get led to the right places. Don't try to do everything yourself. Ask people for advice, ask people for help. You'd be surprised who people know. And that's why I met Dr. Patel, who, saved my life. And 1 week later, here I am, feeling better than I've ever felt. My brain environment is completely different. I feel different the moment I woke up from the surgery. I feel better today than I felt 3 weeks ago when I found out I had it, or even before, because my brain didn't have blood flowing properly through it. And
it's
now
like a fog was lifted.
Yeah, it's like a fog was lifted. It's like my environment was so different, so crazy back then. And I think I lived with it for years. I actually feel better and healthier today than I've ever felt. And I know I get to live a long life because I did something about it. So
this was probably something hereditarily, but you can be in good shape and have one of these, even with a good vascular system.
They had a great vascular system, and by the way, these things are hereditary. Do I know who had it in my family before me? No, and I might have been the first. But that means that screenings in the future for myself, my daughter, my family are important, my brothers and my sisters. Screenings when they turn 25 years old and above are really important for the brain. If you have had a brain aneurysm, whether you know that you're the first or you know that there's a series of people in your family who've had it, making sure that you realize that brain aneurysms are hereditary and they're genetic.
What do you have to say about this procedure? It's almost like going to the moon through somebody's body into their brain. And this procedure and this medical team and this doctor, not only there's the skill, but the personal dedication to the patient. And
I think, first of all, the procedure itself is remarkable. The fact that you can operate on my brain going through my leg all the way up through the carotid artery, I mean, that alone is modern medicine at its finest. So I think when you drop that coil in, and to have the surgeon have the ability to determine how strong the vessel wall is, that aneurysm wall is, I mean, that alone is just ingenious. For somebody to be able to determine that friction, it's beyond any comprehension I could possibly have. But they were able to get the stent in my brain, which to me was a huge feat, because I wanted that stent in there. I knew that if I could put that stent in there, I'd be home free for the future. That stent not only acts as a scaffold to strengthen the wall that actually created the aneurysm to begin with because it was weak, but it also prevents the little coils, the little platinum threads that they fill that aneurysm with, so blood diverts away from the aneurysm so it can't explode and eventually hopefully forms a clot so no other blood can come into it. But by dropping those coils in there and stenting it, that stent gives extra protection so the coils can't fall out of the aneurysm.
Right, especially on one that's a wide neck or fairly wide, right, in comparison to the aneurysm.
And they call a fairly wide neck, like all aneurysms have a neck. The neck is basically the opening of the aneurysm from the artery, wall to begin with. And my aneurysm opening was 4 millimeters. So that's considered a medium to a large, only because anything that's half of its original size is considered a wide opening. That's how they gauge it. So if it had been 2 or 3 millimeters, it would have been great, but I was 8.5 millimeters in an aneurysm, and the opening was 4 millimeters. So it was on the verge of being, hey, we'd like to stent this, but let's see if we can. And not everybody does a stent because it's another pass into the brain. So every time they take a pass into the brain, obviously I have huge risk for myself who's laying there on the table.
The doctors are very conscious of this, and they weigh it very carefully, and especially someone like Dr. Patel, who's done thousands of these, really knows what he's doing.
I think he's done thousands of the actual surgery and 200 stents. And so people say, oh, well, 200 cents, that's not much. Well, yeah, you're right, especially when it was me. I was thinking it wasn't that much either. But, you know, the doctors reminded me, this isn't a root canal. You know, people do thousands of those. This is a brain surgery. And not everybody needs one. And I'm one of those few people who did. So 200 was a lot in the scheme of things because that was more than anybody else had done on the East Coast. And so for me, you know, the fact that I got the stent in, I got an extra protection put around me and to help protect those coils from falling out. I had 6 platinum coils put into the aneurysm.
The aneurysm was heart-shaped, so you have a little scaffolding that's kind of like lace, kind of like a necklace with a heart-shaped platinum aneurysm filled up, so your brain is kind of blinged out, huh?
Well, I hope it stays that way, if it stays filled, because always, even when you have a brain aneurysm and you have a surgery like I had, you always still in the future have to make sure you check by doing a angiogram every 6 months, and then eventually it'll taper off to every few years, but making sure that none of the coils have moved and fallen out. For me, I have a better chance of that not happening because of the stent that was able to be put in my brain. But there are a lot of people who don't have a surgeon like Dr. Patel who feel comfortable putting the stent in, and they have a higher risk, sometimes up to 40% of the coils falling out later in life and having an episode happen. So you always have to take precaution. Just because you had the surgery, don't just let things fall at the wayside. You know, take care of yourself, look, do the exams, make sure everything is okay, so you don't have to ever worry about this again.
Can I say this, that when you have something wrong with you, it consumes your life. And instead of worrying or stressing out or ignoring, you spent your time researching it, and you were more convinced than ever that you had something, so you pursued doctors. Once they found it, you didn't worry. You started looking for the best medical team. You spent your time researching rather than worrying and stressing, right? All your research paid off.
All my research paid off, and take the time to research and do all the things necessary to listen to your own self, to listen to your body knows best, you know best what's right for your body, and then take the time to research so you get the best advice, the best doctors like I did, the best service, and the best care, because you deserve it.
And here we are back a week later in a totally different frame of mind, and so thankful.
So thankful, so thankful. It's a whole new life, a whole new beginning.